Welcome to Rosy Hardy Gardening. I'm Rosy Hardy. Today we're going to do June's question and answers. I will be reading out questions that have been left in our comments section. If you do have any questions, please do leave them there and we will get round to putting them onto one of our Q&A sessions. So let's have a look and see what people have been asking. This is about pricking out seedlings and whether or not you can put them into the soil quite deeply, i.e. up to the first leaves, because this minimises legginess. This is very true when you're doing it with vegetables, etc. It will work with things such as cosmos and other plant material, but the main thing about legginess is plants are not getting enough light. So the key thing is you need to make sure that your seedlings are getting enough light and therefore they won't get drawn and become leggy. Prick them out as soon as you possibly can. Have a couple who have moved and they're now in North Gower in Wales, and they had a lovely garden behind them in Sussex, and now they've got a really horrible weed known as mare's tail. It's Equisetum arvense, and this is a really old plant. It is something that has roots that goes down a huge long distance and becomes really quite a nightmare for people in their gardens. Now if you don't want to use chemicals, and I don't advise chemicals really, then all you can do is just keep on cutting it back, keep on cutting it back. The more you get rid of the top growth that is there, the less it's able to feed itself. You can try and dig down, but just remember the roots are going to go down 5-6 meters and you're not going to be able to find them all. So just keep on cutting it out as and when you see it coming into your borders. This question is regarding violas, and this person says their leaves are getting really huge and it's then hiding all of the flowers. Is he over fertilizing? And the answer is yes. The more fertilizer the violas have, the more you get lush growth on the leaves. And what you can do, because it doesn't actually harm the plant, is cut the leaves off when it's flowering, and you will then see it'll put on new fresh leaves. So don't worry, but don't overfeed them, otherwise you'll just get massive leaves. I've been asked by someone to recommend some bedding plants that the slugs won't eat because there's been an awful lot of rain. Slug and snail population is huge. They are eating all of their cosmos and marigolds and munching it away. They try picking them off. They can't use a beer trap, and they're on the edge of a bog and farmland. So, you know, it's quite difficult. What could she use? And that would be helpful to a lot of people. The thing with slugs and snails is keep on top of collecting them, etc. One thing I have heard that is incredibly good is using something like porridge oats. Porridge oats will kill them because they cannot digest the porridge oats, so that is one way of getting rid of the slugs and snails. The other thing to do is try some of the annuals which have got slightly leathery leaves, so things like begonias, or things which have got scented leaves, so something like cleome. But even that, when the population of slugs and snails are so high, it's really just trying to keep those populations lower by doing, using porridge oats, just picking off and finding as many of them as you can. I've been asked about Anthriscus ravenswing. Anthriscus ravenswing is the very beautiful purple-leaved cow parsley, and it is a biennial. So someone's asking whether or not it is possible to cut the flower stems down and get a second blooming. It really doesn't work that well, I'm afraid to say. Sometimes it will, but most of the time it's not going to make any difference on the plant. This is a question regarding the vine weevil video and what do we do with the infected soil, and the answer to that is basically if you are aware that the soil is still probably might have a few grubs or some eggs in it, then perhaps bag it and bin it, or you can be organic and put it onto a compost heap and just make sure that it gets really heated up, and then that will help with the soil and whatever you've put on there to be killed off. I've got a question here regarding hardy geraniums and which hardy geraniums are best for deterring pests and slugs. The majority of hardy geraniums I have found have leaves that don't get eaten too badly by slugs and snails. But if you're growing something, say, for a shady area, then I would certainly say that the phaeum types are really good for that area. They don't tend to be attacked. And then if you're growing in a full sunny position, something like geranium elkie would be perfectly good for you. Got somebody here who is in zone 5 and they are growing short dahlias in containers this year, saying that they've got no blooms but a few buds, and asking what is the best fertiliser for dahlias. Well, any plant that you're growing in a container and you're wanting to encourage flowering, then a high potash feed. So that tends to be your tomato feeds. They are really, really good. Or you can use something very simple like sulphate of potash, and that should help as well. I've been asked to recommend a tall herbaceous perennial, something about 1.5 metres tall, so something around about my height, for a relatively dry, chalky alkaline garden, and that is going to be in full sun or part shade. So quite a few of the thalictrums would do very well, so something like Thalictrum elin or maybe Thalictrum rochabrunianum would do very well in those sorts of conditions. Otherwise, you could try one of the helianthus, such as Helianthus lemon queen, if you're wanting it for a lot later on in the year, and they would all do very well for you. I've been asked for tall but slim growing plants for clay soil. They can be annual or perennial. So perennial wise, I would suggest some of the Nepetas. They are very good in clay soils. So something like Nepeta grandiflora, which goes up quite nicely, has a good blue flower, but it doesn't go sideways too far. If you want an annual, then some of the Helianthus or the sunflowers would do quite well, or even Cleome would work quite nicely for you as well. This is about Nigella and whether or not you can sow it now in the summer so that you've got some flowering plants in the cooler autumn conditions. And it is possible to do that. Nigella are naturally starting to set their seed now, and they normally will set their seed and it will be dropping a little bit later, so sometime about August, September. It then overwinters, germinates and overwinters, and then flowers the following year. But if you wanted to set some now in a container and then move them out, you could easily get them flowering for the late autumn. I've got another question here about calendula and whether or not it can be direct sown here in the UK, West Lancashire, or is it a bit late now? It isn't really. Any of these annuals can be sown at any time, and you will find that they will grow at different rates depending on how your summer is going. We are actually in quite a late season this year, so if you were to sow some now outside, you would get the plants coming through and you would get short flowering plants for this autumn, and then they would carry on and you would get a few flowers next year, or you could reset some more plants for overwintering to flower next year. Hopefully that has answered quite a few of the questions that have come through. Please do add any questions you want answering in the comments box. Please do sign up to the channel. Thank you very much for listening.